December 18, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Dawn bleeds through a sky the color of bruised flesh. A German Panzer IV, its gray hull dusted with fresh snow, idles at the edge of a fog. Shrouded pine forest. Inside, the air is thick with the smells of diesel, oil, and cold sweat. The gunner, his eye pressed to the Zeiss TZF telescopic sight, scans the narrow, muddy road ahead. His world is a circle of magnified shadows and shapes. Then movement. A silhouette emerges from the mist, low, wide, unmistakably American. Another Sherman. A faint, practiced smile touches the gunner's lips. He has done this before. The Sherman's frontal armor is manageable. He calls out the range. Achtung, Panzer, 1200 meter. The loader slams a 7.5 cm PZGR 39 armor-piercing round into the breech. Fertig. The commander's voice is calm, fewer. The tank rocks violently. The sharp crack of the main gun splits the morning air. The shell screams down the road, a tracer of inevitable death. It strikes the Sherman's glacis plate dead center. A flash of white-hot light, a shower of sparks. But there is no secondary explosion, no fuel fire inferno, no screams. The American tank absorbs the blow like a heavyweight fighter taking a punch. It lurches slightly, then keeps coming. The gunner stares, uncomprehending. He has just hit Sherman at point-blank range. He has seen the shot tear through its kind over and over. He fires again, another direct hit, another futile flash. Now the American tank is turning. Its own 75mm gun begins to traverse, but there is something wrong with its proportions. The turret seems too large, too rounded. The hull is thicker, it looks brutish, unnatural. This is no ordinary Sherman. A cold dread, colder than the Ardennes winter, grips the German crew. This was not in their briefing. This should not be possible. The Panzer divisions had feared no enemy tank, until now. This initial, shocking encounter on the battlefields of the Bulge was not a matter of chance, but the culmination of a desperate, 2-year-long struggle for survival that reshaped American armored doctrine. The Crucible of Fire, 1942–1943. The war in North Africa was America's first brutal classroom in armored warfare. When the M4 Sherman medium tank landed in Operation Torch in late 1942, it was, on paper, a match for anything the Axis could field. Its reliable Continental radial engine, its gyro-stabilized 75 main gun, and its roomy, rational interior were a testament to American industrial genius. Crews, fresh from training camp stateside, had confidence in their new steel steeds. This confidence was shattered in the sun-scorched valleys of Tunisia. Here they first met the German Afrika Korps, and more specifically, the upgunned Panzer IV Ausf. F2. Its long-barreled 75 kW K40 gun could punch through Sherman's frontal armor at ranges where the American tank's own 75 was ineffective. The lesson was stark and bloody. The Sherman, designed for mobility and mechanical reliability, was suddenly vulnerable. It was not just a technical disparity, it was a tactical one. The Germans employed their tanks with veteran skill, using the terrain to ambush and destroy. But the true shock came on the Eastern Front, a theater the Americans observed with growing alarm. Intelligence reports and combat analyses from the Russian steppes told a terrifying story of a new generation of German armor. The Tiger I, first encountered in late 1942, was a monster. Its 88mm flak gun, repurposed for tank combat, could destroy Allied tanks at distances exceeding 2,000 yards. Its 100mm thick frontal armor was virtually impervious to the Sherman's 75mm gun from the front. The American tank, its crews were learning, was what the Germans derisively called a Tommykooker for its propensity to burn when hit, a grim reality caused by the initial use of ammunition. Stowage without wet protection. The problem was one of doctrine. The U.S. Army had envisioned the tank's primary role as infantry support and exploitation, a cavalry weapon. Tank versus tank combat was to be the domain of dedicated tank destroyers like the M10. This doctrine, born in the peacetime maneuvers of Louisiana, collapsed in the face of German combined arms tactics where Panzers and anti-tank guns were one cohesive, lethal force. The Sherman was not a bad tank. It was a good tank fighting in the wrong war, a war for which its design philosophy was suddenly, tragically obsolete. By the time the Allies landed in Normandy in June 1944, this theoretical vulnerability became a daily grinding reality. The close-quarters, hedgerow-choked terrain of the bocage was a death trap. German anti-tank guns like the Paquet 40 and Panzers, Panzer IVs, Panthers, and the occasional Tiger could lie in wait, picking off Shermans as they struggled through narrow lanes. A single Panther, well-positioned, could decimate an entire platoon. Crews watched their friends die in flaming wrecks, their own shells bouncing harmlessly off the sloped armor of the German big cats. They began to call their own tanks Ronsons, after the lighter that promised to light first time every time. Morale, not of the men but of the machine, was at a breaking point. The pressure for a solution was immense, a desperate cry from the front lines that traveled all the way to the desks of planners in Washington and London. The war was being won, but the cost in men and machines was becoming unacceptable. Something had to be done, not in a year but now. This urgent, bloody necessity would force the American industrial behemoth to perform a feat of engineering alchemy, transforming the very tank that was burning in the fields of France into something new, something that could not only survive but could advance. The solution, however, was not a new design from the ground up, but a radical and rapid evolution of the existing one, born from a specific and desperate request from the battlefronts of Europe. The plea for a better protected tank did not go unanswered. As early as August 1943, with the lessons of Tunisia and Sicily still fresh, the U.S. Army's Ordnance Department had begun investigating ways to up-armor the Sherman, but bureaucracy and a lingering commitment to the tank destroyer doctrine slowed progress. It was the impending invasion of Northern Europe, Operation Overlord, that finally provided the necessary catalyst. Planners knew the beachheads and subsequent breakout would require tanks that could lead assaults against fortified positions, absorbing punishment, to clear the way for the standard Shermans. In February 1944, the commanding general of the Army Ground Forces, General Jacob L. Devers, forwarded an urgent request from the European theater of operations. The field commanders needed an assault tank, a heavily armored version of the Sherman, capable of surviving direct hits from the German 88mm gun at normal combat ranges. They needed it before the invasion of France. The Ordnance Department responded with breathtaking speed, rather than design new vehicle which would take years. They chose to modify the existing M4A3 chassis. This was industrial pragmatism at its finest, the Fisher Body Division of General Motors. In Grand Blanc, Michigan, a plant already churning out Shermans with relentless efficiency was tasked with the project. Codename Tank Medium M4A3E2, the vehicle was an exercise in brute force engineering. The modifications were radical. The hull's frontal glacis plate, normally 2 inches thick, was replaced by a massive, 4-inch thick, 100mm slab of rolled homogeneous armor, angled at 47 degrees. This gave it a line-of-sight thickness nearly equivalent to the frontal armor of a Tiger. The driver and co-driver's hoods were replaced with new 140 mm thick cast armor pieces. The turret was the most distinctive change. It was a new heavily cast design, with walls a staggering 6 inches, 150 mm thick on the front, and sides, and a new, thickly armored gun mantlet dubbed the T-110. It was so heavy that the standard 75 mm gun was fitted with a counterweight at the muzzle to balance it. This added armor came at a cost. Weight. The standard M4A3 weighed about 33 tons. The M4A3E2 tipped the scales at over 42 tons. To handle this extra 9 tons without a complete redesign, the engineers used heavier suspension components, a wider track, and retained the powerful 450 horsepower Ford GAA V8 engine. This gave it a lower top speed and made it less agile, but it was a trade-off the crews would gladly accept. It was no longer a cruiser, it was a mobile fortress. The initial order was for 250 units, and they were produced between May and July 1944, just as the standard Shermans were wading ashore in Normandy and meeting their grim fate in the bocage. By late summer, the first of these new assault tanks, nicknamed jumbos by their crews for their immense size and protection, were arriving in European ports. They were not a secret weapon in the grand strategic sense, but they were a tactical surprise, held in reserve for the most critical, brutal operations where breakthrough was essential. They were the answer to the desperate prayers of tank crew, a shield of American steel forged in direct response to the German sword. The stage was now set. The jumbos were in theater, and the Wehrmacht's most powerful panzer divisions, still confident in the superiority of their armor, were about to encounter a version of the Sherman they could not explain, a tank that defied their every expectation and calculation on the battlefield. For the crew of a standard M4 Sherman by the summer of 1944, the war had become a terrifying calculus of survival. Their tank was fast, reliable, and numerous, but in the close quarters killing grounds of the bocage and the open fields of France, these advantages often melted away. The German tactic was simple: hold fire until the Shermans were well within range, then strike from the flanks. A single hit from a Panzer IV's long 75, a Panther's 75 high-velocity gun, or a Tiger's 88 could be catastrophic. The result was often a brew-up, a violent internal fire triggered by the ignition of the onboard ammunition. The psychological toll was immense. Crews developed a morbid familiarity with the sight of burned-out hulls, the smell of cordite, and cooked flesh. They lived with the knowledge that their machine, for all its virtues, was a death trap in a direct duel. This pervasive vulnerability created a culture of desperate innovation. Sandbags, spare track links, and even concrete were welded to hulls in a futile attempt to add protection. They were not just fighting the Germans, they were fighting the inherent limitations of their own equipment. The M4A3E2 was the antithesis of these field modifications. Where the sandbags were a soldier's plea for survival, the jumbo was the Army's engineered answer. Its protection was not an afterthought, but its entire reason for being. The 4-inch thick glacis plate was not merely thicker, it was a monolithic shield that could resist the 75 kW K40 of the Panzer IV at nearly any practical range. The new cast turret was a revolutionary leap. Its 150 mm of frontal armor was virtually impervious to the Panther's 75 mm gun under most combat conditions. The design was so robust that it even afforded significant protection against the dreaded 88 mm FLA K36 of the Tiger I at longer ranges. This was not just added weight, It was a complete reimagining of the Sherman's role on the battlefield. It traded speed for resilience, creating a vehicle that could advance under fire, absorb the initial blow, and return fire with a steady platform. It was a tank built not for the sweeping maneuvers of the plains, but for the brutal meter-by-meter slog of breaking fortified lines. The confidence of the German Panzer divisions was not without foundation. By late 1944, their arsenal, though numerically inferior, was qualitatively fearsome. The Panther, a direct response to the Soviet T-34, was arguably the most balanced medium tank of the war. Its long 75 kW K-42 gun had superior armor penetration capabilities to the Tiger I's 88 met certain ranges, and its well-sloped 80 frontal hull armor was exceptionally difficult to penetrate from the front. The Tiger I was a legend of terror, its 88 gun able to destroy any Allied tank it encountered at distances beyond 2,000 yards, while its own heavy armor made it a nearly immovable object in a defensive posture. German gunnery training was superb, emphasizing first-hit kills and long-range engagement. This technical and tactical superiority created a profound psychological edge. A single Panther or Tiger could, and often did, hold up entire Allied advances. 4. The German tankers, engaging a Sherman was typically a matter of routine. Identify, range, and fire, expecting a kill. Their doctrine and their hardware had conditioned them to believe in their inherent dominance in any armored duel. This established order of the battlefield, where German quality routinely trumped Allied quantity, was about to be shattered by the arrival of a tank that broke all their established rules of engagement. Doctrinally, the Jumbo was not intended to be a tank hunter. It was conceived as a steel spearhead for the most dangerous missions. Its primary job was to lead columns into heavily defended areas, drawing enemy fire so that following standard Shermans could maneuver and engage. It was the battering ram for breaking through fortified villages, river lines, and entrenched positions. The standard armament for the majority of Jumbos was the 75 mm3 gun, the same as in a regular Sherman. This was a conscious choice. Its role was not to duel Panthers at long range, but to destroy soft-skinned vehicles, machine gun nests, and anti-tank gun positions with high-explosive rounds, all while being immune to the return fire of lighter weapons. The psychological impact on both sides was immediate. For the American infantry, advancing behind a Jumbo provided a sense of security they had never known. They watched in awe as anti-tank rounds that would have destroyed any other Sherman simply sparked and ricocheted off its hide. 4. The crew inside, the experience was transformative. The sound of a direct hit was no longer a prelude to death, but a loud, jarring confirmation of their tank's resilience. It allowed them to remain calm, to acquire their target, and to fire back with deliberate, aimed shots. The first encounters with the Jumbo produced a cascade of confusion and disbelief. Within German ranks, a German Panzer crew's training and experience had hardwired specific set of responses. The silhouette of a Sherman meant a vulnerable target. The sight of their first shot, which they had watched strike true, failing to penetrate, was a profound violation of the established reality of the Eastern and Western fronts. Reports from the front lines often spoke of American tanks that were immune to their fire. Gunners would fire again and again, seeing their shells deflect in brilliant, futile flashes. This was not a matter of a lucky angle or a faulty round. It was a consistent, terrifying new fact. The Jumbo's unique appearance, the thicker, more rounded turret and the noticeably more slab-sided hull, began to be noted in German intelligence summaries. They had no official designation for it, sometimes referring to it as a Sherman with a T-23 turret or simply a heavy Sherman, the psychological blow was as potent as the tactical one. The one constant advantage they had held, the superior protection and firepower of their individual vehicles, was suddenly neutralized by a derivative of the tank they had come to dismiss. The jumbo did not just stop their attacks, it shattered their confidence. This shock on the battlefield, this sudden inversion of the established order of tank combat would be put to its ultimate test in the frozen hell of the Ardennes and the meat grinder of the Churchills forest, where the jumbo's purpose would be realized in the most brutal infantry fighting of the Western Front. The German offensive in the Ardennes, launched on December 16, 1944, created a chaotic, fluid battlefield for which the jumbo was never designed, but for which it proved uniquely suited, as American units were surrounded, outflanked, and forced into desperate defensive stands. The jumbos became mobile strongpoints. Their ability to withstand multiple hits from Panzer IVs and Sturmgeschütz III assault guns allowed isolated pockets of American resistance to hold firm against armored probes that would have overrun positions held by standard tanks. One of the most iconic moments of the jumbo's service occurred not in a defensive action but in a desperate, violent breakout. On December 19, the 4th Armored Division's CCB, Combat Command B, was ordered to fight its way north to relieve the besieged 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne. In the vanguard of this thrust was the 37th Tank Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams. His namesake tank, Thunderbolt VII, was a jumbo, leading a column through the narrow, icy roads toward the town of Assenois. Abrams' force encountered fierce German resistance. The jumbo, with its immense frontal armor, took the lead, absorbing the fire of anti-tank guns and Panzers that had been positioned to ambush the relief column. It acted as a moving shield, drawing fire and revealing enemy positions, which were then destroyed by the following Shermans and artillery. This relentless push, spearheaded by the nearly impervious jumbo, punched a narrow corridor into Bastogne on December 26, breaking the siege and proving the vehicle's worth as an unstoppable battering ram, even in the most adverse conditions. But the Ardennes was a sprawling battle of many small, violent actions. In the northern sector, jumbos of the 743rd Tank Battalion, attached to the 30th Infantry Division, were instrumental in blunting the advance of the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte SS. Adolf Hitler near Staumont and La Gleize. Here, they faced not just Panzer IVs but the far more potent King Tiger, heavy tanks of SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Papers. Kampfgruppe. In one engagement, a jumbo took a direct hit from a King Tiger's 88 gun at close range. The shell failed to penetrate the thick turret armor, and while the jumbo was forced to withdraw, its crew survived an impact that would have vaporized any other Sherman on the Western Front. These actions, repeated across the snowy forests of the Bulge, cemented the jumbo's legendary status. It was the one American tank that could advance into an ambush and live to tell the tale. The true grinding test of the jumbo's design, however, had occurred just weeks before. The Bulge, in a battle even more brutal and unforgiving than the Ardennes offensive. The Churchills forest. Before the snows fell in the Ardennes, the jumbo had already earned its reputation in the dark, sodden hell of the Churchills forest. This was a battle not of sweeping armored thrusts but of brutal, close-range infantry combat, a fight for a few yards of muddy, shell-torn earth. Here the jumbo found its true calling. The forest trails were too narrow for grand maneuvers, the visibility too limited for long-range gunnery. Combat was sudden, violent, and intimate. The jumbos were assigned to spearhead attacks against a labyrinth of German Fortifications, log-reinforced bunkers, camouflaged anti-tank gun positions, and nests of Panzer-Schreck-armed infantry. A standard Sherman leading such an attack would be quickly disabled by a single well-aimed shot from a hidden 75 mpk 40. But the Jumbo could advance, its thick armor shrugging off these blows. It would grind forward, its tracks churning the black mud, absorbing fire that would have stopped an entire company. Its job was to get close, dangerously close, and use its 75 gun to blast the fortified positions point-blank. In the shattered village of Schmidt, a key objective in the Hurtgen fighting, Jumbos of the 745th Tank Battalion became indispensable. They operated as mobile pillboxes, pushing into the town square under a hail of anti-tank and machine gun fire. German gunners, seeing their first shots fail, would often fire again and again in a state of rising panic, revealing their positions for the Jumbo's crew to systematically destroy. The psychological effect was devastating. For the German defenders, it was a nightmare. American tank that their standard anti-tank weapons could not stop, methodically reducing their strongpoints to rubble. For the American GIs, the sight of a Jumbo wading through enemy fire provided a tangible, steel-embodied morale boost. It was a symbol of unstoppable American resolve. The climax of the Jumbo's service in Hurtgen was not a single engagement, but the cumulative effect of weeks of this grinding warfare. It proved that the concept of the assault tank was not just valid but vital. It could take the punishment that no other Allied tank could endure and provide the direct fire support needed to break the most stubborn German defenses. By the time the Ardennes offensive began, the Jumbos had already been battle-hardened in the worst conditions imaginable. They had moved from being a novel experiment to a battle-proven, invaluable asset. The crews who manned them and the infantry who fought alongside them knew they had something special. Tank that could not only survive the Western Front, but could conquer it. The ferocious combat in the Hurtgen forest and the breakout at Bastogne represented the turning point not just for the Jumbo, but for the perception of American armor. The era of unquestioned German qualitative superiority was over. A new, resilient champion had entered the fray, and its performance in these two crucibles would forever alter the dynamics of tank warfare in the final act of the war in Europe. The tangible impact of the M4A3E2 Jumbo is etched in the after-action reports of the units fortunate enough to field them. While only 250 were built, their effect was disproportionate to their numbers. Units like the 4th Armored Division reported extremely low loss rates for their Jumbos compared to standard Shermans. Crew survivability skyrocketed. A report from the 745th Tank Battalion noted that their Jumbos sustained multiple direct hits from 75 anti-tank guns and Panzer IVs without a single catastrophic penetration. The most common damage was to the tracks and running gear, wounds that were crippling for other tanks, but often repairable for the Jumbo, allowing it to return to battle. Psychologically, the Jumbo's influence was immeasurable. For American tank crews, it transformed a mindset of vulnerability into one of confident aggression. They no longer had to advance hoping to avoid a hit. They could advance knowing they could survive. This shift in mentality was crucial for the offensive operations of late 1944 and 1945. Infantry commanders specifically requested Jumbos to lead assaults, knowing they could provide stable, protected fire support under the most intense conditions. The nickname Jumbo itself, evoking the immense and powerful, became a term of respect and affection, a stark contrast to the grim monikers bestowed upon the standard Sherman. For the German army, the jumbo necessitated a tactical recalibration, an intelligence. Report from the Waffen-SS in early 1945 specifically warned units to be wary of heavy Shermans with thickened turrets, instructing gunners to aim for the thinner rear armor, or the tracks to immobilize them. The jumbo had forced the elite of the Wehrmacht to acknowledge a new, formidable opponent, breaking the psychological spell cast by the Panther and Tiger. It proved that American industrial ingenuity could rapidly field a solution to a battlefield problem that had once seemed insurmountable. The jumbo was not a perfect tank, but in the specific brutal role for which it was designed, it was overwhelmingly successful. The jumbo's success created an immediate and logical demand for more firepower. While its armor was legendary, its standard 75mm gun was increasingly outmatched by the frontal armor of Panthers and Tigers at longer ranges. In the field, a number of jumbos were retrofitted with the more powerful 76mm gun, creating what crews called the Jumbo 76. This hybrid became one of the most effective and well-balanced Allied tanks of the war, combining the jumbo's legendary protection with a gun that could reliably engage all but the heaviest German armor. However, these conversions were few. The war's rapid conclusion in May 1945 halted further production and major development of the Jumbo series. Its true legacy was not in its numbers, but in the profound doctrinal shift it validated. The U.S. Army had learned a bloody, expensive lesson. The pure tank destroyer concept was flawed, and a balanced armored force required tanks that could both survive and kill. The Jumbo was the ultimate proof of concept for the assault tank or heavy tank role within the American military structure. It demonstrated unequivocally that crew survivability and protected firepower were worth the trade-off in mobility and logistical ease. This hard-won knowledge directly influenced the next generation of American armor. The M26 Pershing, which began to arrive in small numbers in early 1945, embodied the lessons of the jumbo. It featured heavy, well-sloped armor, a powerful 90mm gun, and a design philosophy that prioritized protection and firepower without completely sacrificing mobility. The Pershing was in many ways what the jumbo hinted at, a true main battle tank in the making. The jumbo served as the critical bridge between the fast, vulnerable Shermans of 1942-1944 and the powerful, balanced tanks of the post-war era. It was the tank that taught the U.S. Army how to build a tank for a modern peer-to-peer conflict. After the war, the remaining jumbos were largely scrapped or relegated to training roles. A handful survived, silent monuments in museums and memorial parks, their thick armor still bearing the faint scars and paint of their desperate, decisive service. The journey of this unique machine, from a desperate request to a battlefield legend, offers a profound moment for reflection on the nature of warfare, innovation, and the human cost of technological evolution. The M4A3E2 Jumbo Sherman stands as a singular artifact in the history of World War II. It was not the most powerful tank nor the most numerous. It was a compromise in improvisation born from necessity. Yet, in its thick steel plates and stubborn resilience, it encapsulates a deeper truth about the war. It represents the moment American industrial might translate it not just into overwhelming quantity, but into focused, qualitative answers for the men on the front lines. The jumbo was a response to a specific, desperate need, the need for a shield. It was a machine built to preserve life in a war that consumed it so readily. For the crews who manned it, it was more than a vehicle. It was a guarantee of another sunrise, a symbol of their nation's commitment to bringing them home. It restored a crucial sense of offensive capability, allowing American forces to take the fight to the enemy's strongest points without accepting catastrophic losses. Its story is a testament to pragmatic innovation in the face of a seemingly insurmountable technological challenge, the superiority of German heavy armor. The solution was not to start from scratch, but to evolve, to reinforce, to build upon the robust foundation that already existed. The jumbo did not win the war by itself, but it helped win crucial battles, and in doing so it helped save countless lives. It proved that on the battlefield, survival is as important as destruction, and that the best weapon is sometimes not the one that deals the deadliest blow, but the one that allows you to stay in the fight. In the end, the jumbo's legacy is etched not only in the steel of the Pershing and the patent tanks that followed, but in the very philosophy of armored warfare it helped to cement. It remains a powerful reminder that in the crucible of conflict, the will to adapt, to protect, and to endure can be the most decisive force of all.